Hey there, guys! How's it going? Today we're talking about MTG lore. But just before we get too far going on into the video, we make lots of great content here on the channel. But did you know that over 94% of people that are watching this video right now aren't subscribed? It would be of great help for this channel if you would consider subscribing, so please think about subscribing. It really helps out the channel a lot. Alright, so today we're talking about MTG lore, and it's one of those things that's very fascinating. It's a very deep and storied world. There's lore going all the way back to the earliest sets, Alpha and whatnot. Most of the lore that was out during that era came in books back in the day. It was still the mid-90s and whatnot, so the internet was sort of in its early stages, but later on they started putting that information of the lore, into more snippets online and whatnot. But eventually, you got the full sort of story over time in those snippets and whatnot and things like this. You would get the lore, readily and easily. Like today, it's one of those things. Like if you asked most people, again, like someone was asking me about Cowtime, which was one of the fairly recent sets. No, it wasn't the most recent set, but again, still fairly recent. And was like, oh, do you know what the 12 whatever different pathway sort of things or whatever they're called are in Cowtime? And I was like, nope, got no clue. Didn't even know there were 12 of them or whatever. And I didn't even know what they were called. And again, look, I still couldn't even remember what they're called even now when I'm just saying this. So again, it's one of those things. There's like, oh yeah, there's stuff happening there. Vorinclex is there, and stuff's happening, right? And Oko or whatever, or not Oko, whatever his name is. Tybalt's there causing mischief or whatever, and he's kind of aligned with, this is what I mean. Like, I know some of the little things about the lore of that set, but it's so hard to find, the full story. Like, again, you can find it, but it's very hard to find it. Like, Zendikar Rising, I actually remember hearing quite a bit of the lore from that set, but again, I didn't really hear, that much from it. And a lot of the sets, like Strixhaven, I don't know anything about it. What was the last set before that or whatever? I can't remember. No, that was actually the last set, wasn't it? No, D&D was the last set, wasn't it? Yeah. Because again, I don't know anything about really D&D. I've played once or twice, maybe a couple more times or whatever, but again, unless you know a lot about that, and they didn't really release the D&D side, I mean, unless you know a lot about that, then they didn't not release anything more official for the Magic side of story. I mean, maybe they did, but again, it's one of those things. Where is it? Where can I find it? I don't know anything about it, and I'm deeply versed into Magic. And again, it's one of those things. It's really nice to know some of the lore and whatnot about some of these characters, and that's why we play the game, or part of why we play the game. It's again, a lot of the factors that go into why we love to play this game. And there are people that are very, what we call Vorthos style people, which means that they care about the lore of cards and whatnot more than how good the card is per se or whatnot, or they care more about the flavor and the art and all of that sort of stuff. Or there are some people that are sort of in that realm as well that sort of care more about the art or whatnot and things like that, certainly as well, again. So it's one of those things that it is a big part, and it was a big part of Magic in the past. One of the things was the biggest letdown I think I remember was the War of the Spark. story. Like, a lot of people still talk about it, and like there's all these reviews and different things and whatnot that you can find out there. Again, I haven't really gone into any of this stuff, and I don't know whether whether I will, but maybe I will. If you guys want me to start doing some of that sort of style stuff here on the channel, I will. If you want me to, I'll talk about it a little bit later on in the video. Again, just to remind you of whatever. But again, it's one of those things where it's very difficult. It's so difficult especially when War of the Spark was one of the most marketed, sets. It was there, Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever it was. It was, it was Age of Ultron. It was, it was the coming together of, their, 3 or 4, 5 year story with Nicol Bolas and whatnot and all that sort of stuff. It was, it was that, big, Marvel crossover time, Avengers time. It was just like the end game, was one of those things where it was like, okay, some serious SHIT is going to go down. Either Bolus is going to win or Bolus is going to go down, and whatnot. And the guys, again, if you don't know anything about that, I'm not going to spoil it or whatnot, even though it's a couple of years old or whatever. Again, but again, most of the lore and whatnot that went into it, it's very disappointing if you actually read the actual lore. Like when they put out the trailers and things like that, the trailers were much more evocative and much more interesting and much more like telling of the story of what was going on leading into it and whatnot than what the actual lore for the actual set was. And a lot of people complain about the fact that there's no time, and I do complain about that a little bit here sometimes as well, that there's no time to really savor the flavor of any set, because before you know it, they're already spoiling the next set. And it's like, well, we can't spend any time sitting here thinking about whatever the lore is for this set. We've got to move on to the next set. And what's that? No, that next set that's just about to come out, we can't think about that because the next set's going to come out after that. And then the next, and then the next, and then and it just keeps going. It's not like where it used to be, like you got it's another set. Yes, sure, but the set is building on the same thing that you're still part of. For the next 3 more months, you're still going to be on that same thing, and the story of it is going to continue and is going to finish. And yeah, sure, you're going to get that next set soon, but everything is going to be finished up as far as what happens in the set, blah blah blah, this and that, by the time that spoiler season for the next set starts to roll around. So you've got that time to go, oh, okay, I've read the story and I know what happens or whatever. I've heard it in, lore channels and whatnot, and listening to some of these lore channels is amazingly interesting and whatnot. I love to listen to some of them sometimes because they take you on the journey and tell you what happens and whatnot, and just like the flavor of like some of the things. And again, some of it is better than others, again, but I really liked some of the stuff from Zendikar Rising and whatnot. But again, it was just like, well, it's sort of the story of it just sort of started fading away. It's just sort of, oh, well, stuff happens and then things and stuff and then Jace and then, oh, yeah, plus whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then the next set's coming out, oh, boy. Again, it's one of those things. I think it's very hard because it's just like their level of hype train is the only thing that they really put that much effort into. They don't put that much effort into letting people, or even advertising where you can find out about, these things, unless you're a really dedicated person to the lore of whatever. You have to go actively out of your way to find these things on their website, or you have to go out of your way to find channels that specifically do lore videos and whatnot and things like this. so that you can actually keep up with the story, because it's just like, well, I don't know what's going on otherwise. And again, it's very hard to like keep your focus on one thing for long enough to be like, well, now I know what's going on, and now I know the lore of why Vorinclex is on this planet, and why Tybalt's doing this, and or whatever. Like, again, just examples, whatnot. And again, it's just one of those things. The lore of, the older sets used to be so much a part of, what, was going on. A lot of people, in fact, most people, 90+% of people, knew exactly what was going on in the story and could tell you offhand exactly what was happening in the story. And a lot of people would meet up and say, hey, did you hear about this? And what did you think about this? When such and such or whatever did this or whatever on the, and things like that. So it's one of those things that the lore and the flavor of the sets was readily talked about and whatnot, and people would build decks around, the lore of cards. People still build decks around the lore of cards, but again, you've got to be much more dedicated to that sort of thing, because it's very hard to find the lore for a lot of this stuff. And again, some of the lore is not the best, especially like War of the Spark. It's one of the worst, especially when that set was like so hyped to be like, the end game sort of thing, and was, supposed to have this epic story and whatnot. People expected a really good story, and then you get like, oh, stuff happens, things go on, Khan does stuff, Jace is there, and then blah blah blah, Liliana, zombies, blah blah blah, Nicobolus, blah blah blah, XYZ, I guess the story's over. It's just like, oh great, okay, that's not a lot. It's not very in-depth, not very like character driven, it's not very deep in any way. It's just, yeah, it's very, and again, like, I'm not trying to do like an expose on that specific set, and I think certainly the time for doing like an expose on it has long and gone and whatnot. And any of the older sets certainly again has sort of long and gone, because again, there's many more other lore channels out there that are much better. And again, maybe if you guys want to know about some of those lore channels, I can stick some. If you want to know about them, I'll find some for you, because I know a couple of them. I can stick a link in the description below, or you can just search MTG lore on your YouTubes and whatnot. So that can help you find some of the lore. But again, it's one of those things that I think that, Magic without a story is one of those things that some people might be just a little bit hung up on, the fact that this thing that we play needs to have a story. And sometimes that's my perspective as well, which is another perspective of saying, well, I don't really care as much that, this character would hate this character, and that if I was technically playing them on the same board, it sort of doesn't make sense, because shouldn't they be trying to kill each other? Like if I had Sorin and I had Nahiri on my battlefield or whatever, it doesn't make much sense, because like Nahiri and Sorin hate each other. So it's like, well, why am I playing them together? It's just because they're really good cards. And that's one of the things where it's like, well, I care about the lore to a degree, but then it's like, well, I still want to play the cards that I want to play. And if I want to play Sorin with Nahiri, in a deck, maybe I'm doing a callback to the fact before they start out arguing or whatnot. But again, maybe the story goes along throughout, like, again, that sort of thing can happen where you might just go, oh, well, I'll use D-Spark or whatever on my Nahiri, but it's actually Sorin casting, the spell, because I'm going to put the counters from Nahiri onto Sorin and then use Sorin's ability to basically, get this emblem or ultimate or whatever off and, kill people or whatever. So that's technically sort of Sorin killing Nahiri or taking her down or something. You can do all kinds of funny little things like that in decks like that, where you play out little pieces of story with different characters and whatnot. So that's a little bit of fun that I know some people do have and whatnot. But again, like a lot of people who really care about the lore will go, well, I won't play Nahiri in my deck because I've got Sorin in there, even though I've only got one Sorin and I've only got one Nahiri or whatever, and I've got 1 in 99 chance of finding either one of them. It's just like, well, that's probably irrelevant. This is probably never going to happen. But they're so dedicated again. And there are more dedicated people and less dedicated people. And again, even if you love the lore and the story and whatnot, it doesn't really reflect how you can play, because again, you can play as if you don't really care or you care. You can play in such a way of saying, well, I do know what the lore is, but I just don't really care for this specific because I'm trying to build a deck that is functional and trying to build a deck that I think is powerful enough to, play against my friends and whatnot. And they have some fairly powerful decks. So I'm just not going to rock up with a deck that, folds to, a few pieces of removal or whatnot and whatnot, that sort of thing. So it's just one of those things. You sometimes have to make lore sacrifices, especially when you're playing more competitive formats, but still you do in Commander a fair bit as well, for the sake of having a much more powerful and cohesive sort of style of deck. But anyway, I do think that the lore is still important, and it would be nice for those people who are interested in it to be easily able to access it, be very easily aware of, like, oh, I just go onto the Magic, site and it's here on this page over here. That's it. Okay, right. The weekly update of the story will, or whatever it is, or the update of the story will be weekly on Friday or at about 5 o'clock or whatever. Like those things would be great for people who want to dive into it. Again, it's not for everybody, but again, there are still a lot of people that are out there that do want to get into it and still find that the lore is important to, like, some of it and whatnot. And again, I do say is I like the lore and whatnot. It's part of what gets me, still invested in the game, because it's like, well, unless there's a story tying some of these things together, sometimes it's just sort of, you get into a set and you go, oh, well, what's this set all about? And then people just go, oh, I don't know. Well, isn't there a story for it? Or we guess. We don't know. How do you find out? Oh, no one knows. You see, wizards, they don't advertise it, or it's hard to find it. Unless you're really dedicated, you can't find it. Things like that. So it's just like, it would be nice if we all knew exactly what the score is and where it is. And again, it's one of those social things that a lot of people do. I know that I have a couple of friends that are really, really deeply invested in it, but again, in the story part of it, and they, pay attention to it. Again, like, I wish I could find, more stuff out about it sometimes, because it would be very interesting, and again, it keeps you engaged in another way with the game. So it's just one of those things. But again, it is a little bit sucky that some of those things are going on, but we do have to try to, say to wizards and whatnot, to, like, hey, look, we do actually care about, what's going on with the sets. We don't just want, products bombarded at us. We do want products, and we want to buy things, and we want to be invested in this game. But again, we don't just want that. We want to feel like it's an actual, story, and it's a progression, and it's, part of, the plan, and it's not just, here's another set, and here's another set, eat it up, here comes another one, eat it till you're full, eat it till you explode, like, we just want there to be some sort of, okay, sure, like, you can go onto our website, you can go here, you can go there, or there's an official Magic lore channel or whatnot, whatever, things like this. Or these are the lore channels that Wizards would or does approve of you going to and supports monetarily in some way because they help out advertise, and it is a form of advertising for the game and whatnot. So those things would be nice. Again, there's a lot of people that are out there that are very passionate about it. I still have that feeling of, I don't know. It's just hard for some people to be as invested as what other people are, and again, that's fine. But those people that want to be invested, like I say, again, I want to know a little bit more about it sometimes, and it's very hard to find some of this stuff. And again, we all live busy lives sometimes, so it does become like, well, I've only got so much time in the day to sort of dedicate to these sorts of things. So it is hard to do that. But again, when you've got the time and when you want to know things, it's again when you get to like playing a card or whatever, or somebody says something about it or asks you questions, you just kind of go, well, I don't know. What's the lore behind that? I don't know. Because again, the information is just not like out there that easily, and it's just not like I can go to any site and just know exactly where I'm looking to find it. I have to really dig to find it, sort of thing, or I have to be very specific to find it again. So it's just one of those things. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think about MTG lore, all of this stuff. Write your thoughts right down there in the comments below. Hey, you've just finished watching one of our videos. A bunch of other videos are popping up on your screen now for you to check out, so why not check them out?